Hey guys, in this video we're going to show you an opening for white against the French defense. This is an opening that I played in my chess career. It's the Tarrasch Variation with a bit of a king walk. I think it's one of the easier and more effective systems you can play against the French. Alright, so let's jump right into it, and we will look at Lichess opening stats above my head as we go through the moves. So we're starting with e4, e6, d4, d5. Now here the Tarrasch variation is knight to d2, and if we look at these Lichess book settings, I'm looking at 1600 to 2200, blitz, rapid, and classical games. Now the most common move is knight f6, and I'm recommending e5, kicking this knight back. So notice how all three of these pieces for black are kind of stuck over on the queen side, and our pawns point to the king side. We're going to use this to our advantage. Now my recommendation is f4. It's the second most popular move. Bishop d3 is more common. Now after c5, c3. So what we're doing here is we're creating this blockade on the dark squares, and we're actually going to run our king up to f2 eventually, play g3, and maybe even king g2. So we're going to shift all of our pieces, actually this way, over to the king side, and black's going to shift all their pieces to the queen side. Alright, let's follow this main line. Knight to c6. Now here I like knight d to f3, and we can see it scores 55% win rate, 55% win rate for white, 40% for black. Knight d to f3. This knight on g1 will head to e2. That's the plan. Alright, most common move. Queen to b6. Now here we play g3. This is my recommendation. Black will usually take. C takes d, c takes d. And now again, look at the black pieces. Bishop on c8 is trapped. The two knights are just running into our pawns on e5 and d4. The bishop on f8 only really has one square. So most common move here, bishop to b4 check. Now look at the stats. Lichess added this row that sums all of the above moves. White's winning 62%, black's only winning 35%. Now we play king to f2, and sometimes your opponent might just play into all this so far without knowing any of the theory. When they see king to f2, they're going to be like, what is going on here? Why are you allowed to move your king without castling? So now the most common move is to castle. And look at the top move. King to g2, 67 win percent for white. Now at this point you see that all the black pieces are still looking kind of trapped over here on the queen side. None of them are doing a lot, but you could also argue that our pieces are all on the first rank. So what does black do here? 1,400 games out of 1,600 are playing pawn to f6, trying to undermine our pawns in the center. Now we start to get developed. Bishop to d3. And you might be thinking, can black win this pawn? But after knight takes, queen takes, we have this nice tactic, bishop takes h7 check, picking up the black queen. So this pawn is still safe. F takes e5, most common move by quite a bit. F takes back. Again, keep an eye on this win percentage, 73 for white, 24 for black. This scores really well in practice. Now the top move is king to h8. And then next we will look at the sacrifice, knight takes e5, because there are some high-level games where black does trade a knight for two pawns in the center in these lines. It's king to h8. Now we have a couple moves that I like here. Bishop to b1 and bishop to c2. They both have a similar idea. Back the bishop up, play queen d3 and threaten mate. But we also have knight to e2 here. I don't feel too strongly on this one. Let's check the engine and see what it thinks. Engine kind of likes bringing the bishop back. Alright, so let's go with this. Let's go with bishop to c2. Bishop to e7 by black. And now we can play h4. A3 also looks like a good move. Let's see what the engine prefers. He likes both moves. Okay. Let's go with h4. So what you're doing here is you're keeping the rook on h1 lined up with the black king, And you want to play like knight to g4, and if black takes, you take back with the h-pawn, opening up the rook. Knight to b4, we can always tuck this back and kick the knight out later. Queen to d8, now knight to g5. And you can see our attack is coming. The eval is already +6. So let's say h6 is played. Now queen to h5 can be played. And if queen to e8, we can kick the queen out, followed by knight takes e6, and this whole position falls apart. So this is a really cool line in the French defense. Let's go back now and look at what happens if black sacrifices. So right here, we'll go knight d takes e5, d pawn takes back, and now knight takes e5. So the reason this works is because after knight takes e5, oh, it doesn't quite work for black. Sorry, I'm thinking of the wrong line. So taking here twice for black, we're actually just winning after king h3. Look at the stats. White's winning 91%. Black's not winning any games. So that looked tempting, but in this particular line, it did not work. All right, what else could black try here? Pawn to g6. We can again tuck this bishop back with bishop to b1. And after bishop e7, pawn to h4. At this point, what is black going to try? Rook f7, 12 games. Now knight to e2 could be played, putting another defender on this pawn. Knight to f8 is the most popular move, and now we can play h5. And the engine's already saying 3.7 advantage here for white. So we're getting you into really nice attacking positions, and this was low risk all along to get to this position. So the other thing we should consider looking at, going all the way back to the opening, after knight to d2, what if black plays c5? This is pretty common. There's a couple different ways you could play this. The line that I personally like, back when I was playing e4 in classical games, knight g to f3. And after knight to c6, I like taking on d5 and playing against this isolated pawn. So now you can play like bishop to b5, play against this isolated pawn, and white's scoring pretty well in the database. The other thing that black could try after c5, knight g to f3, they could try taking, and after knight takes, take this pawn. So take both. But what happens here is you get both knights in the center. They control a lot of squares, and white still has a pretty comfortable small advantage. The other thing black could try in the French is going for what's called the Rubenstein Variation. So after takes, knight d7, there's a lot of different ways to play this. I didn't really ever have like one strong system in mind, but I did like the kingside fianchetto. So if we look at, let's say, playing g3 here right away, knight f6, we can take this knight off and play bishop to g2. So what happens in the end is you get this g2 bishop pointing at this weakness on b7, and if you look at the stats, white's winning 60% to black's 31%. So this is a pretty fun line, and it's simple to play too. Black will eventually go for their pawn break. We could take, get the queen out of the way, and we just have this long-term advantage of the bishop pointing at b7. Very comfortable position. Alright, so let's just review that main line so that you guys can remember how to play it. So we have knight d2, this is the Tarrasch, and then we're kicking the black knight. 621,000 games, they're going to go knight back to d7, and now f4. So you build this big center, and when c5 comes, you play c3. After knight c6, just remember you want this knight on f3 and this other knight on e2. So you're moving this queenside knight twice. Now you play g3. Black doesn't have to take here, but even if they don't, that's fine. You're actually going to do the same type of setup. Bishop d3, knight here, you can get your king over to g2. So takes, bishop check, and now you start your king running. King f2, castle, king g2, and this is where you can start to have fun. Bishop to d3, and now you can see the attack is forming. White's winning 73% of the time. Eval's already 1.5 for white. So yeah, this is my French defense system. I'm giving away my secrets. This is what I would play if I'm playing e4 and my opponent plays the French. They got the bad c8 bishop. Always nice to see. Alright guys, so let me know what you think of this opening line in the comments. Please give the video a like and subscribe if you're not a subscriber. We'll see you in the next video.